What's shakin' bacons? Let's talk about Ready Player One, the Iron Giant sequel we've all been waiting for. Ready Player One is directed by Steven Spielberg. It's based on the novel by Ernest Cline. The screenplay was also co-written by Ernest Cline and by Zach Penn. The story is about the future of the Earth. Everyone has kind of tuned into this online realm called the Oasis that was invented by a man called James Halliday. The idea is that James Halliday has died and he's going to pass on the reins and the ownership of this entire online world which everyone just plugs into and exists in almost 24/7. He will pass on the reins to this to somebody who wins the hunt for his Easter egg that he's hidden somewhere in the game, just like a lot of video game developers do, and just like a lot of movie directors do and producers do. It's the story of one specific person, Wade Watts, whose online alias is Percival, as he attempts to find this Easter egg, along with 4 other characters with whom he interacts throughout the movie. Along the way, they have to go up against a giant corporation that is attempting to win the game for themselves so they can continue to monetize and create a monopoly on the world's commerce, which is obviously not good. Now, per usual with my reviews, I'm going to have non-spoilers at first, and I'll have spoilers later on, and I will give you full warning so that you can click away so nothing is spoiled for you if you have yet to see this movie. This movie is very fun, and if you love video games, and if you love movies, and you feel great nostalgia for the 80s and the 90s, you're going to love this movie, because it is just roiling with adventure, with fun, appearances from favorite characters such as the Iron Giant, and it is directed by a steady hand on the helm that is Steven Spielberg. And unlike many movies where I have read the novel first and then I see the movie and I go, well, the book was better than the novel, I am happy to say that I far preferred the movie adaptation of this book. I think that having a co-writer and having a director with the experience that Steven Spielberg has to steady and guide with an astute pen, the edits and the changes in the story that were needed ended up very, very well done and well executed. The actual book that I read was, to be totally honest, it was pretty cringy. I think the movie was a huge improvement on it. When I read the book, it felt to me like a strong self-insertion fantasy who is pretending to be a teenager. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong so much with self-insertion fantasies. It was just the way that it was handled in this book that I found particularly facepalmy. I would be reading parts of this book and it was just like, the character of Artemis in the book is just a very stereotypical Mary Sue, like manic pixie dream girl straight out of a stereotype, and every interaction that she has with the main character, who is very obviously the author himself that he's writing about, I just was like, oh my god, it's so bad. So going into this movie, I was like, okay, thank God, Steven Spielberg, you gotta put us on track. And he did. He did not disappoint. So while this movie is not like beautiful in terms of a flawless story or flawless anti-levels of cringe, it's still much better in my personal opinion than the book. And I'm sure some people are very surprised to hear me say that, but it is much better. The movie has some great, genuinely funny moments without trying too hard. The character design and the costume design with the visual effects was very, very interesting. I loved the way that they implemented this digital realm without making it feel too fake. It wasn't overtly, offensively digitized. They embraced it and then they put enough realism and acknowledgement into the fact that it was CGI that it made it very believable and enjoyable as an existing alternate reality, virtual reality simulation that these people were all interacting with and experiencing. There was a strong tongue-in-cheek playfulness to the film that came, I am certain, from Steven Spielberg, and it was genuinely enjoyable to see those moments from previous fantastic films that he has had a hand in get called up to the front, and you could really feel as though it was a return to form for Spielberg, and I very much so enjoyed it. It was just nostalgic enough without being annoying. I think that having Steven Spielberg be the one to guide that vision really was key in making sure that that happened smoothly and without feeling too try hard. A lot of movies these days, I feel like they're very much so trying to be nostalgic, or they're trying to cater to a certain audience, but they're trying so much that it misses the mark. And Steven Spielberg is a natural at doing this. And so because he's a natural at doing this, this influence and this feel from the film comes naturally, and it's very easy to lose yourself in it and just enjoy the ride as it continues. There were some really great scenes in this movie. The Iron Giants scene, the battles that happen are particularly very cool to watch, and you do feel as though you are in an open world game. Often as I watched this movie, I felt like I was in a gaming sort of environment, which is really fun for me because obviously I love video games and I love fantasy realms and science fiction. So it was very enjoyable for me. It was super fun. I got way into it. With that being said, of course, I don't think that this movie is perfect, which is why I gave it the rating I did, which I'll discuss in a bit. The movie does have some parts where I want to say that if you're thinking this is a children's film, this is definitely not a kid's film. There are parts in this movie that if I was a kid, I'm pretty sure would have given me nightmares. There's a certain middle scene that begins to happen, and I was watching it and I was like, whoa, oh. I was like, if I had kids, I would not take them to see this based on this one scene, or else I'd be like, Johnny, cover your eyes, don't watch. If I was a kid, it would have given me nightmares, just like the Brave Little Toaster gave me nightmares, and just like Hexus from Ferngully gave me nightmares. You were gonna give that child some scary dreams for the rest of their life, and this has a couple scenes that's kind of like that, actually. But overall, it's not too bad. It's very fun. I didn't have any kind of quibbles with the acting. I thought that the voice acting in particular is what really shines in this movie from all of the characters involved, although of course the real life appearances primarily of Simon Pegg as Ogden Marrow and Ben Mendelsohn as Sorrento, which by the way, he gets described as a dickweed in this movie, and that makes me laugh really hard because he was also pretty much a dickweed as Orson Krennic in Rogue One, and I just kind of was like, hee hee. Those live action appearances really shone through, and I particularly enjoyed the supporting cast, not just Ty Sheridan and Olivia Cooke. Like I said, I think the voice acting in this movie is really where it shines. A large problem that I had with the movie was the sheer amount of inconsistencies with the story. There are things that happen in this movie, certain critical events, and as you watch them, you're looking at the screen and you're like, I don't think that needed to happen. Why couldn't she? I'm not clear on how this went this way. Why? That's kind of a gaping plot hole. Why would they make it that easy for them to do this? Wouldn't they have thought about that if they were an evil corporation? Despite the inconsistencies though, it was still pretty fun. There were some really cringy moments though. There's some very uncomfortable moments. Like, for example, there's an odd moment between Artemis and Percival where things are getting a little physical and they're highlighting things on these touch sensor bodysuits that are happening to Percival's character. And I was watching this and I was like, if I was a teenager, I probably wouldn't think anything of this, but the fact that they're showing some pretty intimate interactions and these people are portraying younger to middle-aged teenagers makes it very awkward to witness. And I was like, oh, I'm not certain that was necessary to be included. This is kind of weird to be watching. I don't know about this. There's a couple things that probably could have been taken out or smoothed over. I will say the amount of cringe in this movie is super high. Go into the movie expecting teenage romance levels of cringe and you'll be able to get through it. I got through it, but it was still kind of like, oh. And I will say that the movie has some points where it does lag. I did want to reach for my phone, and of course I couldn't. There were parts like around there, the middle of the movie, even having read the book and being fully aware that the movie wasn't being close to being finished yet, that I was just kind of like, they probably could have wrapped the plot up right here and been done with it. Like, they could have just launched immediately into that final confrontation and I would have been fine with it. I wouldn't have missed anything else that they showed in the movie. They could have easily been cut out, but unlike other movies, I think their inclusion did end up adding to the nostalgia and the enjoyment of the movie overall versus taking away from it. However, it did add a lot of length to the film that maybe wasn't strictly necessary. So, to sum up, my final rating for Ready Player One ended up being a 66%. Now I'm going to talk about spoilers. You don't want to be spoiled, you better scooch. scooch along so you don't get spoiled. Time for spoilers. Now, there's a lot of inconsistencies with this movie. This is the biggest issue I have with this movie, other than exactly how cringy it was, and other than the fact that I did kind of feel like it could have been wrapped up near the middle of the film. My biggest takeaways in my rating scale were from inconsistencies. There were a few things left out of the book that I missed, such as Ogden Marrow. I was very excited when I saw Simon Pegg was going to be Ogden Marrow. I thought he would be really fun as that character, and while they do at the end say, oh, he was here the whole time, he was the curator, he did not play as central of a feature in this movie as I expected him to play. I did feel as though them just kind of quickly tying it up at the end was a bit of a disappointment, and it was inconsistent with the book overall. Other than that choice, however, I didn't disagree with the differences in the changes they made from the book. There were just decisions made throughout the movie in the storyline that needed to be made in order for them to advance the plot in certain ways that just didn't make enough sense to make me buy into them. There are moments where Artemis will just suddenly step back or sacrifice herself for Wade as the main character, and you're watching it. And it's a scene, it very much so reminded me of Titanic, where you're watching Titanic and Rose doesn't scooch over on that huge door for Jack and he just freezes to death. And I was watching the movie and I was like, she had a long time before those IOI police cops, security forces would have caught up to them. So why couldn't she escape with him? There's literally no reason not to have had that happen. And it was just done simply because reasons. Plot wouldn't have completely moved forward without it happening. I just didn't fully buy into it. There's a couple decisions she made throughout the movie that were very similar to that, where I was kind of like, why would the character behave this way? There's another scene where she gets captured and the other players are attempting to save her, and they hack into the IOI system using Sorrento's password that Wade happened to see, because LOL, old people write down passwords, am I right? So they hack into his rig using his password that he left out. I thought what they were going to do was release her from her little prison, because it made it seem as though she was stuck in there, and instead all they did was direct her to just reach up and then pull a lever. And I was just thinking to myself, like, if these people are effectively enslaved, and we heard a story earlier about how her dad was killed by them, why would they make it that easy to escape their cells if that's literally all it takes is them to reach up? And she's like a relatively average sized teenage girl, right? And she was able to reach up and flip these levers and pull a switch and release herself. That's literally all it takes. And I thought maybe I missed something, so I double checked after the movie, and I didn't miss anything. Like, they didn't hack in or release a code or do anything. Just literally all these people could have done was reached up and released themselves. So I thought the whole loyalty thing was a huge flaw. Like, was it that easy to release themselves? Couldn't they have done something a little more with that? And the scenes where IOI was chasing them, they would alternately send their evil little drones after these people, and then they would send real people after these people. But this all happened during chase scenes that occurred after they used drones to plant bombs to blow up the stacks where Wade originally lived. So you're watching on foot chase scenes later on, and then near the end of the chase scenes they'll call the drones back in, and I'm just thinking, if they had drones that could drop or plant bombs in the stacks, why wouldn't this corporation have just dropped or planted bombs with the drones instead of ineffectually running after them on foot? Didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Again, happened because reasons. There was another scene in the end where Sorrento looks like he's about to have this really badass scene. He's gonna go after the kids himself. He grabs a gun, he's driving, he's going after them in this USPS future van, and he gets out and all the people, Wade's like, "People of the stacks, come help me." He gets out with his gun and he's like, he doesn't really say much either. He just waves the gun and people are all like, oh no. And they just step back and they slowly part for him to walk forward. And he doesn't look around. He's not like circling. He's not checking his environment. He just holds the gun like this and he just kind of walks forward and glares at the post office van. And I'm just watching it happen and I'm thinking, why aren't any of these people just literally tackling him from the side or kicking him in the back so he falls, because he's definitely 100% not paying any attention. And then at the end, the police randomly show up and you're like, There's literally been bombs exploding. People have been getting like crushed in traffic. And you mean to tell me that the cops finally decide to show up at the end of the movie? Just randomly, they just show up at the very end? Where was there any hint of their presence where logically there would be police showing up anywhere else in the movie? In fact, it's kind of hinted that they don't exist, and then they show up randomly at the end and you're like, wait, where'd they come from? The other issue is that this film was super cringy, as I mentioned previously, and it's not just the teenage romance parts. There are some lines that were delivered by the actors, and it's not the actors' fault. It's like there's a scene where Wade's Aunt Alice goes, I swear to G-O-D. Really? Did she just spell out God? I swear to G-O-D. And then when they die, Wade doesn't react like at all. He's kind of like, you killed my mom's sister at one point in the movie. But other than that, it's really kind of creepily emotionless and sociopathic. Granted, he doesn't have a happy home life, but wouldn't you be kind of deeply traumatized watching all of your neighbors and your only existing family just blow to smithereens from a company? Wouldn't there be some kind of mental and emotional repercussion from that? And at the end, you just see him macking with Artemis, and you're just kind of like, wouldn't a normal person have reacted a little more strongly to that? But it was in keeping with the book, in which he really didn't have much of a reaction at all. They were just like, I was so upset that this happened. And then he completely moves on like nothing had happened at all. And I mean, so in that, I gotta give, I mean, they stuck to the book, so I can't really fault them for it, but it's just very odd to see this kind of a completely apathetic approach to the death of all of your neighbors and of your relatives. Another line that they showcased in the trailer was, welcome to the rebellion. What friggin' rebellion? There's no rebellion. There's no rebellion in this movie, and I was just like, oh my god, they're trying to make it look as though this is the Hunger Games or something, and it's not. There's no, what are you rebelling against? Oh yeah, we're gonna try and fight so that the company doesn't win. Yeah, okay. I mean, Wade was kind of doing that on his own beforehand. It's just such a stupid line. There was a couple really, really dumb lines, and I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe this made it past some editor. I can't believe Spielberg left this in. This is so stupid. I couldn't believe how stupid some of these lines were. If you are looking for the Iron Giant sequel, that end battle is so fun. It was so cool seeing modern video game characters and nostalgic video game characters just rushing into battle, all the people of the digital world coming to their help. I really loved seeing the fact that all of the normal people in the world were basically like, we're not going to take this anymore. And it was a very interesting message to perceive the warning about mega corporations attempting to control people and the information feed that they receive. There's a lot of hints of this IOI corporation that are, you know, they're like, oh, well, we can take up 85% of people's visible view space without them getting seizures, and how can we filter and control the flow of media to these people? Very strong message about bewaring the dangers of monolithic corporations and the amount of power that media corporations can have. It's a very interesting message to see put out there in a movie. The other major message of the movie, of course, was the fact that you shouldn't neglect reality in favor of virtual reality. I'm not sure that they put it across as well as they possibly could have. The message in some parts of the movie kind of came across as like a grumpy elder type figure that's just standing there with their spectacles hanging off the edge of their nose, shaking their finger like, you young whippersnapper need to get your heads out of your phones. Those video games, they're gonna rot your eyeballs right out and desensitize you to violence. You need to get back in the real world. It was a little heavy-handed at times. I didn't think it needed to be as heavy-handed as it was. Still good to know. I mean, you should still go out and get fresh air while we still have fresh air to breathe, right? So, meh. But again, my final rating for this movie was 66%. Do I think it's worth seeing in the theater? Yes. And that is because it visually is very cool. I may have to go back and see it in 3D. I normally see movies in 2D because I have Movie Pass, but I may have to go see this one in 3D just to fully appreciate it. Did you guys see this yet? Are you planning to? Tell me what you think. Don't forget, I am always on Twitch if you want to hang out live Monday, Wednesday, Fridays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I will catch you later.